I hope you all are doing well, my dear friends. So the topic for today which we are going to discuss with you, that concepts of flexibility. What is the concept of flexibility in yoga? There are different myths of flexibility, that flexibility is just to touch the toes, the flexibility is just to get into your maximum range of motion. But according to the biomechanics, the flexibility is different, mobility is different, and stability is different. We must have to learn about that concept, how we are moving, the science of movement. How the body is moving, the science of movement, and what is the science of your body, the biological aspects. So there are different concepts people talk about the flexibility, like flexibility is not over flexibility. Flexibility is your average range of movement. How much we can move in our extent that our alignment should be in one line. If your alignment is going out from any posture, right? If the alignment is going out of any posture and you're trying to able to touch your toes or reach to the maximum range of motion, but with the pain, with the injuries, that flexibility we don't need it. So in the concept of flexibility when we talk, so with the basics if we are talking about in the concepts of flexibility in yoga, three things which we have to be remembered. The first thing comes is the stability. This is the stability. So stability, when we're talking about stability, means it doesn't mean that when you say people is stable, when it is stationary, it's not moving. Stability is the balance. Balance, when we talk about, comes under like, stability doesn't mean to hold. Stability doesn't mean to hold to statue like this way. Everybody knows how to stand. Everybody knows how to sit. In relation to the stability, if we talk about, in that form, suppose the person, when we're talking about the flexibility is your range of motion. Like if you ask me to lift your shoulder up, I can. Right? You can ask me that, lift this leg up, I can. But how much stable I am here, if I'm shivering or drooping on one side, and I'm feeling more restriction in the end range of motion. So stability is basically the nature, right? The stability is basically the form of body which stays into the one direction, wherever we are moving, and that direction, if I am stable, is there. Suppose if we talk about the posture, stability is not only just to hold. That written in the books. Stability is not about to hold easily. Stability is just, are you able to come back to your orientation? Are you able to come back to your orientation from perturbation? If you are able to come back from orientation to perturbation, this is the stability. If you are in a posture and you are not able to come back, as somebody disturbs you after that, to your perturbation, that is not the stability. So stability is not just to hold the pose. Simple example if we take, right? When we come to the side plank, posture, whatever the lower arm is there, right? If I'm balancing on the side plank like here, whatever the lower posture is here, this is my lower arm, this is my lower elbow, right? Which is down. So in the side plank, if I am in this posture, if somebody bumps me here, and a little bit imbalance, I feel like this and I come back to my orientation, right? If somebody bumps from the back and I feel like this and I come back. So this is, we call the stability. When you are coming back to your orientation from your perturbation. So stability doesn't mean I'm holding a pose. Sometimes this happens with you when you're going to the pose. when you're entering into the pose, you feel little bit shivering. But as you try to adjust yourself after some time, you're coming back to your orientation. And after that, you don't need any alignment. You don't need any modification. If somebody trying to do this, you feel little bit out, but after that, you are able to come back. That is we call the stability. Sometimes what happens, my dear friends, that people are trying to get into the position, into the side plank. If I am going for the side plank and I'm taking my this elbow locked completely, like hyperextended, right? Hyperextended. So what I am trying to do it here, I am trying to force. I am trying to create the pressure on my ligaments. I am trying to create over pressure on my ligaments. So when the joint is locked, the whole pressure comes to the ligament and it becomes weaker. It becomes weaker. So when this joint becomes weaker, so that you could not say this is the stability. If you are holding a pose, that side plank with the locked elbow, if you're able to hold it, we could not say this is the stability. Right? This is the stability. No. But as somebody, when you're hypermobile, your joint is locked and somebody bumps you, you were not able to come back into the orientation. You were not able to come back to the same pose and you lose your balance and you fall down. So that is, we don't say that this is the stability. So stability basically when I am able to come back to my orientation from perturbation. That the command or that state of position we called stability. So that stability has a different meaning in the workbook. In the textbook, there is a different definition. But you should have to know about this, my dear friends. Before to get into the yogic practices, to teach, we have to clear about the stability when I am able to stay and somebody is trying to adjust me or trying to get out of balance and the person is able to come back to their original state without any discomfort or pain or the injuries, without losing their balance. This is we call the stability. So next component that comes is flexibility and mobility. So with this component comes the flexibility and mobility. Now, when we're talking about the flexibility and mobility, flexibility is the range of motion. This is, if you ask me to do this, Dr. Sumit, I'm able to lift my shoulders up. I'm able to lift my shoulders up. This is my flexibility, I know. But after that, you ask me, could you please squeeze your shoulder together? Could you please squeeze your shoulder blades towards the center line? If I'm not able to do this, then my mobility is less. Then there is no mobility. If I am able to do this and I am able to retract my shoulders in this range, this is my range. After that, I am able to rotate my shoulder blades in or not. I can. But if I'm not able to do this, I'm doing this backwards. This is not the mobility. So flexibility is the range of motion. But the mobility, after that, can I go with any contraction around that joint? That is, we call the mobility. So if we take an example, basically, when you're going for the Chaturanga Dandasana, where the teacher says spine in one line, shoulder blades retract together. We can easily get into the pose, right? Your elbows close to the trunk, We can easily able to go to the pose. But as I am entering into the pose, I can stay. After that, when the client asks, when the teacher asks, spine has to be one line, retract your shoulder together. If this is not possible, then the mobility is zero. Then only we are working on the flexibility only. Wide leg split pose, right? The wide leg split pose that you called Hanumanasana. The Hanumanasana monkey pose, wide leg split pose. So in this wide leg split pose, people able to open their legs. How much the range you have, right? How much the range you have. If you are going into that wide leg split pose, whatever the range you have, according to your own flexibility, you can reach there. You can reach there and slightly your pelvic tilts forward. Your pelvic drops down. When your pelvic drops down, you're able to reach that range. Right? You're able to reach that range. After that, you're trying to get more range of motion, more range of motion. When you're trying to place your hand onto the floor, your fingers onto the floor, and if you're not able to stretch more, then there is no mobility. If you are only able to reach to the movement, whatever the range here, right? If you're able to reach, if you take an example like this, simple pose. If I'm not able, after that, my pelvis here, I'm holding the hand on my pelvis. And if after that, I'm not able to take this leg away, I'm here. If I'm not able to take this leg away, I could not stretch more. And if I'm trying to get to stretch more forward my front leg and I'm feeling out of balance. So this is, I'm not working on the mobility. There is no mobility is there. A mobility is very less. I'm only working on the flexibility here. As you reach to your final pose, right? As you reach to your own range of motion, this much my flexibility. After that you ask Dr. Sumit, can you please stretch a little bit more? This is my range of motion. After holding this stretch, if I'm able to get my front leg more forward, my joint is stable, more forward, this is my flexibility plus mobility. So same thing, you can increase that mobility also in the poses. Suppose you are in your pose, Hanumanasana, the wide leg split pose. What do you have to do? A simple way you have to do is just that. You can place one blanket under the front leg. Under the front heel, you can place one blanket. And you ask the client to just reach to the pose. And after that, you just try to drag that blanket. You just drag that blanket forward, backward, forward, backward, forward, backward. If you are able to do this, then you are working on your mobility also. Right? Then you are working on the mobility also. So flexibility is your initial range of motion, how much you can do, whatever you have that flexibility. But mobility is when you are starting into the pose, you are entering into the pose, whatever the range of motion you have, after that can you get your front leg more forward without any disbalance or imbalance or without any instability. That is the term we call the flexibility and mobility. So we don't only need this. We don't not only need this, we need mobility also. And then it leads to a good stability. So both needed here, flexibility plus mobility, and then the body will be stable easily. Then the one term more comes here, hypermobility. So in this hypermobility, if we talk about, so mostly people are not aware nowadays this hypermobility. You are doing your asana practices, right? You are practicing your asana practices every day. You are going for the hypermobility with the same way, but the joints, the tissues, right? You are not using the correct muscles here. We are not using the correct muscle, we are overloading a joint. This is mostly happening with your knee joint nowadays. Like you ask them to standing like this. Ask them to forward bend. Your pelvis is going more forward, knees are getting locked. So there is no use. If you are moving in the yoga pose with this hypermobility, it is creating more damage to your ligaments, your cartilages, your meniscus, and slowly there is a synovial fluid get adhered. Right? Slowly the synovial fluid get adhered. Cartilage destruction, and that leads to the knee pain. Weak knees. Then you feel imbalance, compensation with your knee joint also. Same thing with the elbows, like this way, it is going hyper flexible, hypermobile. So in the yogic tradition, if you are holding the pose with the same way, you are creating more damages to the joints and the muscle become more weaker. So we must have to find out this concept of flexibility in yoga, that stability, how we have discussed, flexibility is your range of motion. But after that, I am able to contract around that area, that is my mobility. And hypermobility, when we talk about, we have to use the muscles. We don't have to overforce your joints or overload your joints. If we overload our joints, it also does affect other soft tissues around that area. So if your ligaments become weaker, what will happen? Stability of the joint affected. You're walking sometime, it get popped, it get locked. You're doing any posture, creating extra stress on your meniscus and more inflammation. So we don't have to move with that way, that same, whatever the hypermobility we have. If we are doing yogas in the same way of repetition for hypermobility, it can cause more injuries during yoga practices. And whatever the pose you are practicing, that will not give you any healing effect, or it will not become any remedy to your problems. It will increase your problems more after some time, and you will become more weak, more loose from the joints, and it leads to more pain. So guys, the request is that this is what we have discussed in the beginning. So you have an awareness when you try to do your practice or teachings, you must have to be focused on this stability, flexibility and mobility plus hypermobility. So this concept we have to follow in our yogic practices. I hope this must be clear to you. Till then, take care of your stability, flexibility, mobility, and we don't have to get ourselves into hypermobility. If anybody has come back from hypermobility to a good range of motion, a good stability of the joint, which we have to maintain. So till then, enjoy your day. Namaste. Have a nice day.